You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
You're listening to No Huddle Radio on the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packers analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Tehan. In addition to this show, I write for the PackersPost.com and Cheesehead TV. Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. Sean, 1 week in the books, a big game coming up, the home opener at Lambeau on Sunday. But first, how about a word from our sponsor?
Yeah, you mentioned that home opener coming up on Sunday, the first game of the home season of the 2024 season for the Green Bay Packers. Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packer fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packers game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. If you're watching with us on YouTube, Facebook today, we thank you for being here. Subscribe to us. You can see that link on your screen right there in front of you, theticketking.com, packerstalk.com/tickets. Subscribe to the Packers Talk Network on YouTube. We are everywhere, and we are happy to be here. And although the season opener, it didn't get off to the greatest start, Gil, I think the season opener went 3 plays too long, if you're asking me.
Yeah, if we could have ended it just before that injury, it would have been certainly a benefit. A lot of things that I, felt good about, a lot of things that I felt less than good about in that performance against the Eagles. And, the thing that I think disappointed me the most outside of the injury, which is devastating, that 7-minute drive that the Eagles went on in the fourth quarter. Here was the defense's chance to step up and show, hey, this is how things are going to be different under Jeff Hafley, whether they were tired, whether they were just beaten man on man, giving up that drive and leaving Jordan Love and then Malik Willis with no time to try to score again. That hurt. That really hurt.
And I mean, you still got to make the plays. It's still the NFL, but 2 penalties that were kind of suspect that were on that drive that extended that drive for the Eagles certainly didn't help the Packers case at all. There was that defensive hold on Jair Alexander where it looked like Devontae Smith may have gotten away with a hold, and he was just trying to keep his balance out there on a passing play, which would have resulted in a 3rd and 12 for Philly. And that's essentially that would have been a drive killer if no penalty was called. Kenny Clark then got called for a defensive hold as Saquon Barkley was trying to get out of the backfield later in the drive. Kind of a downer, but obviously the thing is, I look at this as a positive with the Packers opener where they still put up 29 points, even though they were not clean on offense and they were not clean in general. They still generated 3 turnovers on defense. They had 7 interceptions all of 2023. They had 2 in game 1. That's progress, man. And they clean up these things. I feel like the things that were really, it was uncanny, it was undisciplined. The things that they were having issues with are all correctable. It wasn't for lack of trying or anything like that. You're getting the field for a new scheme. You're getting back into the football shape, back into game shape. And it's something where there's a lot of positive actually to come out of this game with the Packers. It's just, obviously, they were on the wrong end of the scoreboard. It was a close game like we anticipated. Obviously, I would have been okay with this if it wasn't for Jordan Love, though, going down with that MCL sprain in the 3rd to last play of the game where he got twisted up. And just an unfortunate football play. That's all you can say. It's an unfortunate football play that happened, and hopefully Jordan Love isn't out too long.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the whole season flashed before our eyes when that happened, and thankfully, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a very long-term injury. I've heard so many different things, but realistically, 3 to 6 weeks, hopefully on the shorter end of that, is what most experts are saying. You never know with these things, but the Packers have to at least tread water until Jordan Love is ready to come back. And I think, and we'll discuss this obviously when we start looking at the matchups for this game, but it puts pressure on a bunch of other position groups. As long as Jordan Love is out of the lineup, other people are going to have to step up and play better.
I'll say this, two positives. First of all, it's good that it's this early in the year. It's not in November. It's not in December when you really need your guys and you really need your quarterback out there during the pressure pack part of the season. And secondly, given the way that he got twisted up, the slow-mo replay, the knee popping out, him suffering only an MCL sprain is a hell of a win. It's an absolute win. I thought it was a season ender. I thought the season was over. And then you wake up you see that he's carrying his own bags off the plane in Green Bay after they get back from Brazil and back in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And him carrying his own bags and going off on the plane under his own power. Obviously, he seemed to be favoring that knee a little bit, that left knee a little bit. But that was a heck of a positive, though, to take away from that. That's only an MCL sprain. And the reported diagnosis is that he's going to be out 3 to 6 weeks. Patrick Mahomes, I remember in 2019, had a similar injury. And I remember this because he missed the game against the Packers when the Chiefs hosted the Packers on Sunday Night Football. And the Packers squeaked out a win at Arrowhead Stadium. At that time, I was still living in Minnesota. I was living on the other side of the Mississippi. And I heard a lot of Viking fans saying, oh, yeah, the Packers, they would have lost if the Chiefs had Mahomes. Well, guess what? The Chiefs the very next week didn't have Mahomes, and they've hosted Minnesota, and they beat Minnesota.
Right.
And that was the game that provided the difference in the Packers winning the division, the Vikings not winning the division in 2019. But Patrick Mahomes is only out for 2 games in 2019 with a similar injury, an injury that I remember watching where it's like, oh, boy, like he may be done for the year. No, he ended up coming back. He ended up coming back 2 weeks later. So if Jordan Love is only out 2 games, I know Matt LaFleur is kind of leaving the door open saying, hey, if he's cleared, he's going to play, and he doesn't need to really practice in order to play. I think 2 games, that's what I'm thinking, especially with Minnesota coming up in week 4, where that's where I see Jordan Love making his return near the end of the month.
Yeah, I think that's realistic. I think he's going to miss, at least 2 games, but we'll see what happens. And look, you take it 1 week at a time. We do know this. The Packers tend to be conservative when it comes to, having players come back due to injury. And I think that is definitely the right approach. I would rather lose another game in September than lose Jordan Love long term.
Oh, 100%. And we still got 16 more games after week 1. There's a whole lot of football left. And you don't want to start 0-3. If you can get if you can go 1-1 the next 2 games, that's ideal. Just don't get out of September winless. Have at least 1 win on the record in September. Get Jordan Love back to full strength and the offense back to full strength. Jordan Love, he's been the only Packer who hasn't practiced at all this week, which is considering good news, where Josh Myers got hobbled up on that same play that Jordan Love did in that game. He hasn't been on the injury report this week. Some other notable injuries, running back Josh Jacobs, he's been limited this week with a back issue. Marshawn Lloyd, who missed that opener, he's been limited this week with a hamstring. Kenny Clark's been limited this week with a toe injury. Also, cornerback Corey Ballantyne's been limited with an oblique. Fully participating rookie linebacker Edrin Cooper as well with a knee. He had some flash plays in that first game, and you got to hope that he's getting healthy, and we may see him a little more, but that's kind of what we're looking at Packer injury-wise right now.
Yeah, it doesn't look too bad, all things considered, but obviously when you don't have your franchise quarterback, that's a major issue heading into Sunday's game. I still think the Packers are capable of winning, but it's going to take a few things going right and a few people stepping up to make that realistic.
So let's talk about this matchup coming up. The Packers are hosting the Indianapolis Colts. Offensively, obviously, we're planning on no Jordan Love in that season opener at Lambeau Field. Indianapolis, on the other hand, they're coming off of a tight divisional loss in Indianapolis against the defending AFC South champion Houston Texans. And looking at the offense and the defense, right now, obviously, these rankings they're based after 1 week of play. These are going to change quite a bit in the next few weeks. But right now, Green Bay's total offense, despite all the poor play, the penalties, the offensive line issues, them getting kind of a slow start, not really being very productive in the red zone, still the 3rd total offense in the NFL from week 1. Indy's total defense, not so good. 30th overall in total defense. Gil, looking at this, and obviously you got to take these numbers with a grain of salt. The Packers and Indy, Packers offense scored 29 points last week. Indy allowed 29 points on their home turf. What's the matchup that we should be keying on as fans between the Packer offense and the Indy defense?
Yeah, I mean, the one that stands out to me is that the Packers have to be able to run the football. And whether it's Josh Jacobs, Emmanuel Wilson, if Marshawn Lloyd is ready to go, we need to see the Packers move the ball on the ground. That's going to mean that the interior of the line is going to have to step up and block better. The only two players who played on the offensive line last week that had good run blocking grades, according to Pro Football Focus, were Zach Tom, who was elite, and Elton Jenkins, who was very good. And then you had Jordan Morgan, who was pretty good, and then a lot of question marks. But with an inexperienced quarterback who's only started 3 games in his career and has not even been a Packer for 3 full weeks under center, you're going to have to be able to run the football. Now, the good news is the Colts gave up 213 yards rushing against Houston last week, which places them dead last in the NFL after 1 game. It's only 1 game, but it gives you hope that the Packers can move the football on the ground. We're going to need to see more of what we saw in the second half, where Josh Jacobs made some nice little stutter steps, some hesitation, some nice fakes, and broke off 20 and 30-yard runs.
And the thing is with the Packers rushing offense last week, they got off to such a slow start. And despite that slow start, when Emmanuel Wilson got in the game, he had some really good carries. Josh Jacobs started to get a feel. The offensive line started to get their grasp. They still ended the game with 163 yards on the ground. They had a good performance overall. That was 7th best in the NFL in week 1. And then you talk about the Colts allowing 213 rushing yards. That was the worst defensive rushing performance in week 1. Now, Indy, I'll say this, where they were going against C.J. Stroud, a very, very good quarterback. They obviously were thinking about trying to defend the pass before the run, but Indy got burned by their running game. And also, they got burned in the passing game, too. They allowed 204 passing yards on defense as well, which was 11th worst in the league in week 1. The Packers, though, showed a lot of balance on offense. That O-line, Josh Jacobs, they're going to have to continue that, though, in the running game, just to help Malik Willis out. We got to have a big Josh Jacobs game for the Packers to have a chance.
And I do think that we're going to see Matt LaFleur call a number of jet sweeps or reverses. He's going to pull out some tricks in this game to keep a little bit of variety in the offense. You're not just going to pound the rock play after play after play. I think we see some RPOs because Malik Willis is a mobile quarterback. I think, we'll see another play like the jet sweep that Jaden Reed scored on last week. You talked about that 166 yards on the ground. Well, 33 of them came on that jet sweep.
Yep.
We're going to see more of that just to keep the defense a little bit guessing and off balance, and to try to, set up other things out of similar formations later in the game.
And I want to say this, too, with the Packers offensive line, the rushing attack, whatever you do, stay away from DeForest Buckner. DeForest Buckner is an absolute force. The Packers remember him from his early days with the San Francisco 49ers. He's been a damn good NFL player for a very long time. Now, Buckner's dealing with a bit of a back issue, so he may be a game-time decision for Sunday. My guess is he plays. He's a pretty durable dude. He's so good. He's so talented. Whatever you do, just don't run at him. Run away from him. Block. Make sure you have max protection on him. He's an outstanding defensive lineman. He's the best defensive player on the Indianapolis Colts. That's going to be really critical. He did have 1.5 sacks last week for the Colts. Right now, that's tied for 11th in the NFL amongst all pass rushers. And he's a load of a player to deal with, and the Packers got to be ready for him.
Yeah, they do. And look, he's slowed by the back injury, and we'll see how effective he is. But I am concerned about Josh Myers and or Sean Ryan trying to block DeForest Buckner. That is not a matchup that favors the Packers. And if I'm the Colts, that's the place I'm lining up DeForest. But I would keep Buckner away from Elton Jenkins as often as possible and try to create a mismatch there. And the Packers have to counter by running away from DeForest Buckner and maybe giving whoever it is who's lined up with him a little help. Maybe your center has to double up with one of the guards in order to sort of try to contain Buckner because he is that good.
It's going to be a chess match between head coach Matt LaFleur and offensive coordinator Am Stenovich and Indianapolis defensive coordinator Gus Bradley, a veteran coach who's been around, who's done it for a long time. Jason Bosco chiming in. The defense has a chance to solidify its identity in this one. Well, Jason, good news. We're going to talk about the Packer defense for a little bit. So Indy's total offense, they were 16th amongst all teams in week one. Green Bay right now, 28th in total defense. But I'm going to read off some interesting numbers, though. The Packers, obviously, they allowed 34 points in that opener. That was tied for third worst in week one. Indianapolis they scored 27 points. That was tied for 11th in the league. The Packers allowed 266 yards in the air. That was sixth worst. 144 rushing yards on the ground, 10th worst. The Indianapolis offensive attack tied for 14th in passing yards with 199 in week one. 104 rushing yards. That was 19th. It was interesting, though. The Packers, though, defensively, 80.3 passer rating allowed. That was the 9th best opposing passer rating from week one, and only allowed 58.8% of completion attempts to be completed by Jalen Hurts. That was the 8th best in the league as well. Jalen Hurts obviously threw 2 interceptions, and the Packers only allowed about 3.8 yards per carry in week one. That was also tied for the 10th best in that week one opener. So some good things to really sprinkle in there. And you're going against a Colts offense that's run by Shane Steichen, a former offensive coordinator for Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia. You got to think that Philadelphia was kind of the perfect game to get ready for this one.
Yeah, it matches up well. And, the curious thing when you look at the statistics from week one for the Colts, who led the Colts in rushing last week?
I believe it was Anthony Richardson.
You are correct. It was Anthony Richardson. Do I expect that to be the case again this week? No. But, those rushing statistics were a little skewed because the quarterback was the one picking up most of the yardage. And very, very surprising as to how good of a job that the Texans were able to do containing Jonathan Taylor. He averaged only 3 yards a carry, 48 yards on 16 carries, did not have a run for more than 7 yards in the entire game. If the Packers can come close to doing that, I would be thrilled. And again, one of the things that was frustrating in week one from the Packers standpoint, again, there were times when they could have made tackles for loss and just didn't make the tackle. You got to wrap up. I know it was week one. I know starters don't play in the preseason much, if at all, anymore. But these guys it's fundamentals. It's football 101, and you got to finish your tackles and make the plays that you're in position to make.
Yeah, there are a lot of times where it was a matter of, hey, guys are in the right spot. You just got to make the play. That's not on the coach. That's on the player for sure. I will say you mentioned Jonathan Taylor against that Packers front seven. They got to have a better game plan against this guy because Saquon Barkley, I thought Saquon Barkley would definitely play very well against Green Bay. Now, I'll give Saquon Barkley some kudos in week one from the reception touchdown. That was just a really good throw and a really good catch by Barkley. It was just one of those perfect throws, and it just dropped in the bucket right there by Jalen Hurts. So well done by him, and a great catch by Saquon. And that's just somewhere you got to tip your cap. The other times, though, where he scored, he had the one touchdown where he didn't even get touched in the red zone. That was a problem. The Packers' red zone defense has got to be better. They got to, if they're going to have a chance this weekend, they got to hold Indy to field goals if they're in that territory. They got to keep them out of the end zone. But the matchup that I'm looking forward to watching, though, is between Indianapolis quarterback Anthony Richardson, like you mentioned, and defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley for the Packers. Anthony Richardson, he is a big dude with a big arm, and he's got some great talent. He needs a lot of polishing. He was only 9 of 19 throwing the football last week. Now, if you're watching Red Zone or watching the highlights, you saw him throw that 70-yard bomb off his back foot, which was a beautiful throw. And that's the kind of talent he has. And then he had a 54-yard touchdown pass, too. That was a pretty awesome play by him, a pretty awesome throw by him. But he was kind of erratic outside of that. He was 7 of 17 throwing the football. Besides those 2 big touchdown throws, he threw an interception. The guy is kind of reckless when he plays. He's a gamer. He's a good player. But I feel like if Hafley definitely tried to make Jalen Hurts beat the Packers from the pocket in week one. And I did like that. Hurts did not make a huge impact with his legs in that first game. Saquon Barkley obviously made a huge impact with his legs. That was a problem. Jeff Hafley, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of game plan he has for the Packers defense going against a dual threat guy like Anthony Richardson with a stud running back like Jonathan Taylor. I feel like it's going to be very similar to the Philly game. It's just a matter of just playing the lanes better and filling your gaps better than they did in week 1.
And you can't give up those splash plays. No. Richardson is not consistent yet. The talent is there. But what is this, his 6th NFL start? I mean, he hasn't had a lot of experience. These two quarterbacks between them, don't have 10 NFL starts. So, to me, you want Richardson to beat you slowly. You want to give him as many opportunities to make a mistake as possible. And part of that is to put some pressure on him, but you don't want him to beat him. You don't want to be beaten by his legs. You want him to keep the passes short and make him earn every point he gets.
And for those watching on YouTube and Facebook, what kind of matchups are you looking forward to watching? Feel free to fill in on the comment section at any time, and we're happy to offer our opinions on it as well. Just going through some numbers, though, real quick, Gil. Turnover ratio, the Packers, they were +2 in week 1. That was tied for 3rd best in the NFL from week 1. Colts were -1. That was tied for 9th worst. Richardson threw that interception, didn't generate any takeaways. They had multiple times where it looked like they picked off C.J. Stroud, but it was called back because of penalty. And speaking of penalties, the Green Bay offense had 10 penalties in week 1. That was tied for 3rd most in the NFL. 7 on defense. That was tied for 12th most. Indy's offense, only 4 penalties in week 1. That was tied for 4th fewest, and 5 penalties on defense. That was tied for 6th fewest. And then 3rd down conversions, the money down. Green Bay was only 27.3% on offense. That was the 9th lowest in week 1. Their defense, though, only allowed 28.6% of 3rd down conversions to be attempted. That was tied for 11th best. Indy's offense was 50% on 3rd down in week 1, tied for the 5th best in the league. Their defense was 50%. That was tied for 5th lowest. It was literally split dead on both sides for that Colts-Indy game. And then also outside of that, some quick injury report for the Indianapolis Colts. DeForest Buckner, we mentioned him. He's been out this week with a back issue. Safety Julian Blackmon, who's shown some flashes in the NFL, he's been out this week with a shoulder issue. And defensive end Kwity Paye, who had 8.5 sacks last year for the Colts. He hasn't practiced this week with a hamstring problem. So a lot of injuries on the Colts front. Wide receiver Josh Downs has also been limited this week with an ankle issue. Gil, with all that being said, obviously the Packers got to limit the penalties. They got to take good care of the football if they're going to have a chance. Why do the Packers win on Sunday?
The Packers win on Sunday if they limit their mistakes and don't beat themselves. If they can do that on offense and take away the big play on defense, they're going to win this football game.
If Malik Willis can manage the game properly and Josh Jacobs, if he gets 20, 25 touches, Packers are going to win this game because that means Josh Jacobs is on the field. That means the offense is chewing clock and they're productive. Also, if they're better in the red zone, I know it's a bit of a tall task with a backup quarterback in there and not Jordan Love in there. If they can finish those red zone drives with 6 points, 7 points instead of 3 points, that's a huge factor. Keep Indy out of the red zone. Play good defensive sound football. Keep attacking Anthony Richardson on defense this week. He's still a young guy, and he's a guy who hasn't been through a lot in his NFL career. You can rattle him pretty quickly. If you could get to him early, that's going to be huge. Gil, why do the Packers lose?
Packers lose if Malik Willis makes too many mistakes and if the team does not support him by raising their play. If the penalties continue, if the bad tackling continues, if the Packers beat themselves, they will lose this football game. Top to bottom, Green Bay has a better roster than the Colts. Missing your quarterback is a big deal. But the Packers, they really, even against a great team like the Eagles last week, they lost a winnable game. They beat themselves as much as the Eagles beat them last week. If they can't get out of their own way, we're going to be in trouble.
If the Packers have 17 penalties again, they're not going to win. If they got to keep going forward. They cannot have these massive defensive holds and these massive holding calls on the O-line. And also, the officiating's got to be a little better. It was bad for Philly, too. I mean, it was bad all around. It just wasn't a good – it wasn't good. It was week 1 for everybody. We'll put it that way. And with the Packers, though, they got to take care of the football. They got to have a turnover-free game, and they got to generate some turnovers on defense to have a chance. And if they lose, they're going to turn the ball over. They're not going to be able to stay on the field on offense. That defense is going to get gassed. It's just not going to be enough. Gil, with that all being said, what is your prediction for Sunday's home opener against the Colts?
Yeah, I think this is going to be sort of a feeling out game for Malik Willis. I think he'll show flashes, but I think there will just be a little too much inconsistency on his part. It's going to be close, but I think the Colts will end up winning this one 20-17. How about you?
So I want to have a disclaimer real quick. I had my prediction set last night. Gil sent this to me just minutes before the show, his scoring prediction, because we're pretty damn similar because great minds think alike. That's just the way it works. With Malik Willis, he has won a game as a starter. He's never thrown a touchdown pass as a starter. This is a guy who he seems like he's a bright kid. He's got some really great athletic ability, but he got beat out by Will Levis in Titans camp, and he never really got his footing in Tennessee. Now, Tennessee, obviously not the situation that is that the Green Bay Packers have when it comes to quarterbacks. We're a little bit spoiled and lucky in that regard. But I just feel like Malik Willis is not going to be enough, and that's going to be a huge factor. And I think also the Packers, they're going to be able to drive the football. I think Matt LaFleur is going to have a good game plan. But instead of getting in the end zone, they're going to settle for field goals. So I have Colts 20, Packers 16. 16 being, I think the Packers do get in the end zone one time with an extra point, but then I think they settle for 3 field goals, whether it's off of a defensive forced turnover, and just not capitalizing in the red zone with touchdowns and getting 3 instead of 6 or 7. I think that's going to be the difference.
Yeah, and that would be like deja vu all over again, which is exactly what they did against Philadelphia down in Brazil.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gil, before we wrap up with some trivia and before we send everyone on their merry way, before we have kickoff on Sunday, before another week of NFL football, what articles do you have coming up on Cheesehead TV and the Packers Post?
Well, for the Packers Post, I did talk about the importance of the offensive line stepping up this week against the Colts, especially with Malik Willis in there, and the importance of running the football. So I did do some analysis and break that down. And for Cheesehead TV, I talked about the Packers and the NFL's dilemma with the poor quality of play in September football games nowadays. You're reducing the number of padded practices. You're reducing the number of two-a-days. I get that. That's for player safety. You're also reducing the number of preseason games and increasing the number of regular season games, which is the opposite effect. But, you know, how many different games did we watch in week one where the broadcasters and the announcers said, this is like the 4th preseason game, the caliber of play? It's a problem for the NFL, and they've got to, both the Packers coaching staff and the league in general have to figure out something, because we want to watch quality football. Even, you know, if the games count, they should be good football games.
You can only simulate so much in a practice.
Yeah.
It's just, there's so much that happens in games that you can't work on that until you actually are in it. And that's just, it's an extension of the preseason, that week 1 in September. Hopefully week 2 is a little better. Gil, you ready for some trivia?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, it's been quite some time since the Packers have beaten the Colts on the football field. Last time Green Bay beat Indy, it was in 2008. The Packers beat the Colts at Lambeau Field 34-14. Colts Hall of Fame quarterback Peyton Manning threw 2 second-half interceptions that day. Both were house calls for the Packers. Nick Collins' interception went 62 yards for 6. The other one made Packer history. Gil, which Packer registered the other interception, and how many yards was the pick 6 return that day?
Oh boy, yeah, that is a tough one, but I happen to sort of remember this game, and it was a good one because the Packers ended up winning by 20 points,
and they were 6-10 that year, and this was probably their best game that season.
Yeah, that is true. I believe it was Aaron Rouse.
It was Aaron Rouse. Yep.
I'm gonna say 98 yards.
You're 3 feet away. Aaron Rouse. 99-yard touchdown. Wow. It tied Tim Lewis's team record for longest interception return for a touchdown in Packers history. And actually, I should have called Aaron Rouse Senator Aaron Rouse. He's currently a state senator, actually in Virginia. Go figure, right? So Aaron Rouse doing some good things. Hopefully in Virginia right now, he did some great things for the Packers when he was part of the Green Bay Packers in the mid to late 2000s. But yeah, he's in the history books forever. Tied with Tim Lewis, 99-yard pick 6 off of Peyton Manning. What? Hey, man, that's something that you could run a campaign off of all the time. Just that alone, like, I picked off Peyton for 99 yards. That's it. My brother stripped Melvin Gordon for a touchdown in high school football for an 89-yard score, score in high school.
Nice.
He could always put that to his name if he ever wants to run for office. I'm just saying, he's not the kind of guy who's going to run for office, but if I would put that on my name.
Is it on his resume?
No, I don't think so. It's like I brag more about it than he does. But I bet Aaron Rouse, hey, I would put that in my bio if I were state center. In his position, I put that in my bio. Returned a touchdown for an interception for a touchdown off Peyton Manning. But anyways, the Colts and the Packers, the home opener for the Packers, less than 72 hours away. Two teams looking to get their first win of the new season. Hopefully the Packers will have the edge in the comforts of Lambeau Field against the Colts. Kickoff from Titletown, scheduled for noon local time, 1 p.m. Eastern by Gil, 11 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Pacific, 7 a.m. Hawaiian time. Gil, let's hope the Pack get a win for the first time in 2024.
Yeah, we're looking at that. It's important. You need to look, if Jordan Love is going to miss 2 games or 3 games, you got to win at least one of them. And this is a good opportunity. Let's hope the Packers can indeed cash in, but we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Let's go.
Go ahead.
Oh, let's go. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, all right. That's it for today. We'll be right back here next week. Follow us on Twitter at Gil Packers and at GB Packers Sean to stay up to date on all things Packers or to ask us questions. Or you can email us at gbpackerssean@gmail.com. Make sure you're subscribed to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show. Thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.